Remember guys like Dwayne Carter or Shaka Hayward, Chris Rumpf, Ross Cockrell, Victor DiMunkeji from recent years? Those guys were studs and the definition of a defensive playmaker. Unfortunately for Duke football in 2024, they don't have eligibility left. So who are those playmakers that Duke can expect to step up this season on the defensive side of the ball? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, the host of this fine show, Locked On Blue Devils, your one-stop shop for everything Duke athletics. We talk a lot about the Duke football team. Duke men's basketball gets a lot of run here on the program, and we'll have football conversations for you here today. This week, however, in the world of Duke athletics, it's the start of another academic calendar across college athletics. We're seeing volleyball, soccer, all of these great sports off and running over these next few days. So best of luck to all the Duke Blue Devil athletes out there. But again, today we'll talk about the football team. We're talking about defensive playmakers with our good friend Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast, who joins us on the show here today. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Also, make sure that you leave us a 5-star rating and written review, particularly on the Apple Podcast platform. If you watch our show daily, thank you for doing that on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, share it with your friends. Also, you can follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. So without further ado, here on Thursday, August 15th, 2024, I'm excited to bring on Josh Cox, who's here with us once again. Great to see you, man. Here we are 15 days away now from the start of another Duke football season.
Yeah, it is happening. Camp is... And they're in the middle of it, man. They're beating each other up, and they're probably at this point ready to beat somebody else up. But it is getting close. I don't know if you can smell it where you're at, JJ, but it smells like pigskin,
Yeah, it absolutely does. I'm smelling it. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready for Under the Lights. Friday night, of course. In the coming weeks, we'll see high school football get set for kickoff under those Friday night lights. But Duke's got them as well, because that first game of the season against Elon is going to be one of those Friday nights under the lights.
Yeah, Duke has a couple of those Friday night games, 2 of them at home, and then Northwestern as well as a Friday night game. And so you're a little bit different, a little bit unique. Some people like them, some people don't. But at the least, we know that there are fewer games on Friday night, and so you're more likely to maybe get some eyeballs on your team on those days. And so that's a good thing for Duke.
Manny Diaz is the new head coach for Duke. He's been a head coach before, notably throughout his career. He's been regarded as one of the best defensive coaches in all of college football. If you talk to any coach, Manny Diaz included, they'll tell you, hey, to have a good defense, it really helps if you have good playmakers, if you have guys who just make things happen on the defensive side of the ball. In my tease to open the show, Josh, I threw out some big defensive names in recent memory, right? From Dwayne Carter and Shaka Hayward, Ross Cockrell. Those guys aren't playing for Duke football. But man, some of those names, man, they got the job done on that defensive side of the ball throughout their Duke career.
Yeah, I think of players like Jeremy Cash and Devon Edwards and those types of guys that were just electric, man. They just kind of knew where to be at the right time. And they may not have wowed anybody on the physical attributes and the combine work, but they had a knack. They knew how to play football, and that's a lot of times just what you want to see in a kid is, does he know how to play? Does he know where the ball's going before it gets there, right? And so that's what makes a good defensive player. And of course, there's a lot of work to be done on the lines as far as angles and timing and all that good stuff. I've never been a college football player before in my life, but I can only imagine. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about what potentially Duke has on this roster. And maybe in a couple of years, we're talking about, some of these guys as former Duke guys that were just electric playmakers on the defensive side.
I'm going to be looking for 5 defensive playmakers from Josh here on the show today. And I'm curious to see the selections that we come up with. And as we've talked about, though, Josh, there are going to be guys that we don't mention today on the program who end up being just big-time playmakers for Duke this season. Depth is so important. Injuries are such an unfortunate reality. Talked about it on yesterday's show as well, that, you look at a team like Texas, one of the premier teams in college. They've already lost 2 running backs to season-ending injuries before they even play a down of real football. So hopefully injuries are not a big factor to what Duke's going to be able to do going into the year. But to that point, maybe there are guys out there that just we're not even thinking of because we're not expecting their number to necessarily be called throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I believe you're right. History has proven that, you need to be deep. I mean, this is not necessarily on the defensive side of the ball, but, last year Duke used 3 different starting quarterbacks to win ACC games. And so, you're going to always need that, need depth. Last year we had a little bit more depth in certain areas than I think we may have this year. But that's okay. Well, proven depth. This year is going to be about, can some of those younger guys who didn't maybe get a ton of snaps last year, can they take that step up? These Deshaun Stones and guys like that, can they step up in certain roles? Obviously, Duke at the transfer portal with guys like Trayshawn Devones and others who are going to provide some depth. But yeah, if you're asking me about the 5 guys, there are 5 playmakers. I can give you 4 good ones that people probably are thinking about, and then one of them I'm going to give you later on is probably somebody no one's thinking about. So I like to do that every now and then.
Give me the first one. Give me the first one before we take a break.
Okay, let's do the first one. I think it's the most obvious one. Obviously, the main goal of a defense, other than taking the football away from the offense, is to tackle football players, right? I mean, guys are running the football. You're supposed to get them on the ground. Guys catch a pass, put them on the ground as quickly as possible. And the guy on Duke's roster who does that the very best, in fact, finished in the top 5 in the ACC last year, over 100 tackles on the season, was linebacker Trey Freeman. And if you remember, JJ, at the beginning of the season, Trey Freeman it's kind of weird because he started at the end of the 2022 season, but he came in last season kind of oddly on the depth chart a little bit, fighting with Cam Dillon and not really sure. There was other guys rotating in. And so, but he quickly established himself. He stayed relatively injury-free throughout his career and ended up with 105, 106 tackles, total tackles last season. You need your linebacker. He's in the perfect spot on the field. You need your linebacker putting people on the ground. And so I believe an impact, electric defensive player that Duke is going to see this year is Trey Freeman. And not only because of what he does on the field, but he is also a leader, off the field for this team. David Feely has talked numerous occasions about how hard Trey works in the weight room and how he's a leader in the weight room. And he may not have a boisterous personality per se, but I believe Trey leads by example, and I believe he's got the respect, of his teammates. And so I think that's the most obvious guy. If you were to ask most, Duke fans that follow the program, who's the most impactful player on the defensive side of the football, I think Trey Freeman's got to be the first name that comes off the board.
Well, you think about Trey Freeman, a Durham native, and when we look at what has been announced recently, we've seen the Maxwell Football Club put out their Chuck Bednarik Award watch list that will go to one of the top defensive players in the country. And who's on that preseason watch list? It's Trey Freeman. And to your point, I think that's absolutely a great playmaker to start with. And when you think about some of the best playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, I think of linebackers first, Josh, with how quickly they're running around the football field, making things happen. So I want Trey to be that guy this year. Certainly.
You mentioned Durham native, Northern High School grad here from Durham. But also, it's going to be interesting to see with the Diaz defensive scheme. I think technically it's a 4-2-5, but I believe we may see some more, a little bit. It may look a little bit more like a traditional 4-3 in a lot of ways. And so I don't know how that will impact his sheer numbers and production there. I'm not really sure. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know if this is the case, but this year, you have the capabilities with the microphone and the helmet
Yep.
for a Mike linebacker. Don't know if that would be Trey or if that will be another linebacker. Not sure about that, but all these things are very interesting. And but anyway, at the end of the day, I'll put my money on Trey Freeman to lead this team in tackles once again, be in the top 5 in the ACC.
All right, that's our first player. Top defensive football playmakers that we'll have for Duke in this 2024 season. We continue this conversation after we take our first time out on the show. Locked On Blue Devils brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go when you're looking for tickets to anything. I'm talking sports, comedy, concerts, theater events, and so much more. And talking about sports, Game Time now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You could save up to 60% off buying last-minute seats via Game Time. You save even more with exclusive in-app deals on seats ahead of the game or the event. All-in prices, where you toggle this feature, showing the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. But you got to turn that feature on. Your seat views, you can get the panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Keep rolling here on this Thursday, August 15th, 2024. I'm JJ Jackson. He's Josh Cox. He's with Duke Football Talk and the Section 17 podcast. And you guys are back. Preseason episodes out there.
We are back. We did our stat preview episode released this past week. And so we tell who we think will lead Duke in several statistical categories. We have some side bets that we always do have some fun with. We caught up with the guys after being away, for 4 months and kind of being off the grid a little bit. And we brought in our friend of our pod, friend of this pod, Jordan Mann was on that one as well. And so, if you haven't listened to it yet, make sure you go and check out Section 17 podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're at, and do what you do here. And that is be a faithful listener, subscriber, rater, reviewer, commenter, all that good stuff. We all the Duke podcasts, kind of the network there.
Yeah.
Appreciate all of the different people who listen to multiple podcasts. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, we support one another for sure. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you see the handles on the screen at Joshua Cox, at Duke FB Talk. So go support, go follow, and you can see direct links to the materials we want you to go check out. Okay, we're talking defensive playmakers. Trey Freeman's now off the board. Who's another name for people to look out for?
Yeah, I'm not going to necessarily do these in order of importance per se, but my next guy that I will nominate and talk through is Chandler Rivers. I love number one. I love Chandler Rivers just as a person, as an individual, just an incredible young man, and has been since the day he showed up on campus at Duke. I mean, he was an early enrollee his freshman season, came in early to camp that year. Immediately. We were like, hey, this kid's gonna, he's playing. He's not coming here to sit for a couple of years and then play. Like, he's playing. And sure enough, he did as a true freshman, and that's continued. And so I believe this season is the season that Chandler continues to get better. He seems to be in the right place at the right time. He really knows how to play his position. Pass breakups, I believe last season, 4 or 5 of those, I would expect those to rise this year. Last year you kind of had that rotation with Al Blades, and early in the season, Miles Jones, along with Josh Pickett and along with Chandler Rivers. This year, I really feel like it's going to be Chandler and Josh Pickett on those edges as much as they can be in the game. And so Chandler's going to get a lot of snaps. He's going to be called upon, to defend the best, wide receiver on the opposing team oftentimes. And so I look for him to have a great season. I think most people are picking Chandler, probably to lead the team in interceptions. In fact, everyone on the podcast picked Chandler. And so I had to pick someone else because I'm trying to win a stake at the end of the season, trying to get a little competitive advantage there. I picked one of my other guys that I'm going to mention here in a little bit to lead the team in interceptions. But I think Chandler's the logical choice there to lead the team in interceptions. And what I enjoyed, what I loved, if you remember last year in the bowl game, JJ, Chandler was the MVP of the bowl game, and he spent a lot of time in that backfield. He made a couple different tackles behind the line of scrimmage, against Troy there in the postseason. And so I'd love to see that. I'd love to see Chandler able maybe to get up on the line of scrimmage a little bit more. I don't know that they would move him into that, kind of Brandon Johnson role much because he's needed so much at corner. But I do think Chandler can hold his own at the line of scrimmage as well. And so Chandler Rivers, my second guy out of Beaumont, Texas, and just a solid young man for sure.
Yeah, expanding that recruiting footprint there for Duke football, Texas high school football. Man, there are a lot of great players out there. And Chandler Rivers, a big one. I've been such a big fan of his over the years. Chandler Rivers has also a pretty awesome friendship with Tyrese Proctor on the basketball team and a couple of the basketball guys as well. So anytime we see that blend, Josh, I'm a big fan of that. So,
well, anyone that spent any time around Chandler, I mean, even just greeting him after a game or something like that, or seeing him, I mean, he's got an electric personality, and he's got a personality that people want to be around, and just an overall, overall solid young man, in general. And so, yeah, I mean, what's not to like about this kid for sure,
Without a doubt. All right, who's the next player?
Yeah, so we've had a secondary guy, we've had a linebacker. So let's keep the mixing it up as the theme, and let's go down to the defensive line. There are a couple of people here actually that I think are deserving of some talk, some hype. But I'm going to go with Wes Williams on the defensive line. Wes has really played end and played tackle. He's a little bit of a hybrid there. He's a big, strong kid who can play inside if need be. He's also quick and athletic enough to play on the end if he needs to. It'll be interesting to see what Manny does with him this season. Wes, people have been talking about Wes for the last two seasons, and just because of the rotations. I mean, you have to think about last year's line with Aeneas Peebles and Jamion Franklin and Dwayne Carter and R.J. Oben. You can just go on down the line, and not to mention the guys that are returning this year in your Ryan Smith, VJ Anthony, Michael Reese. I mean, there was a lot there. And so Wes didn't necessarily get like a crazy ton of snaps this season. I mean, this is his season to break out, in my opinion. Now, I don't know if that means, he's going to lead the team in sacks. I don't know. I don't know if that means he's going to have a crazy number of tackles. I think you understand, and I understand the game of football enough to know that sometimes on the defensive line, the most valuable thing you can do is draw a double team. The most valuable thing you can do is make the opposing team focus on you so that your teammates can make plays. And so I think Wes Williams is extremely important for Duke. I believe that Wes Williams and this line, we mentioned Chandler Rivers getting interceptions. Well, most interceptions happen because the defensive line got pressure on the quarterback, and the quarterback rushes a throw, or the quarterback throws an inaccurate pass. Timing is off because he got pressure. And so, I believe the success of turning the football over, it rests on that D line. Also, as you know about Coach Diaz and about Jonathan Patke, they are both committed to tackles for loss. They are both committed to that. They want this defense to really stop people behind the line of scrimmage. They're going to be aggressive up front. And so, once again, I think this all of those things play into a healthy Wes Williams should have his, by far, the best season he's had in a Duke uniform.
Top defensive playmakers for the Duke football team. Wesley Williams up in the front. hopefully making things happen. Again, a big hiatus from this Duke team with Dwayne Carter not being involved. And I also think we've got a big Wes Williams year ahead of us here in 2024. And I think Manny Diaz is going to love kind of having a big plugger up there, making things happen and getting after the quarterback from time to time as well. All right, 2 left, Josh. 2 to go. A couple of defensive playmakers that we want to highlight on the podcast today. But first, we got to take one more break here on the program, and we'll be back here in just a moment. Want to say thank you again always for your support of Locked On Blue Devils. Thanks for making us your first listen and first watch each and every day. For your second listen today, make sure you go enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, college football's expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We bring back in Josh Cox, who's here with us once again from the Section 17 podcast. We've been talking about the top defensive playmakers for Duke football. Manny Diaz is known to have several of them. He's taken over a Duke defensive unit that's having to replace a few bodies there. We've already highlighted 3 guys that we expect to make big plays for the Blue Devils in the likes of Trey Freeman, Chandler Rivers, Wesley Williams. Who are the next guys that you want to highlight? Next up?
Yeah, so I'll go with another one that I think no one is going to be, surprised at, and that is safety Jalen Stinson.
Yep.
Speaking of guys with just incredible personalities and magnetic personalities, Jalen Stinson's one of them, but he's a heck of a football player too. And if you saw him walk in the door, he would not intimidate you with his size. He's a little guy, but man, he loves to hit people. He reads defense as well. He was in the top 15 in the ACC last year in tackles. And if you talk to him, he mentioned this at ACC Media Day, that when he sat down with Coach Diaz and him looked over his film from last year, and he was borderline embarrassed at the number of missed opportunities that he had, whether it was interceptions or whether it was tackles that he had last year. And he still wound up with, I think, in the 80s, I think it was 88 tackles that Jalen Stinson ended up with last season at the safety position. And so as Duke fans remember, Jalen tested the waters for the transfer portal there just to see what was out there. And then ultimately, told us he came back to Duke for a couple of different reasons. For himself, to finish the job that he started. Also for Coach Diaz, he really appreciated Coach Diaz's honesty and his willingness to look at and to honestly evaluate Jalen's game and to help him become a better football player and young man. But then he said it was his teammates, it was that locker room that he wanted to come back and be a part of. And so it's interesting. You've heard a lot of people during this coaching transition. You've heard David Feely talk about the locker room. You've heard Jalen Stinson talk about the locker room. You've heard Manny Diaz talk about the locker room. We heard Jordan Moore talk about the locker room at ACC Media Day a little bit as well. And so these guys, they want to play together. And so I believe Jalen Stinson's in for a great season. Obviously, that safety position, he's been there. He's got a lot of snaps under his belt for his career. I could see him, behind Trey Freeman once again as the second leading tackler on this team. And I think he's in for a great season. I think I think you may even see him be that third team All ACC, maybe second team, but maybe third team All ACC guy this season. And so look for Jalen Stinson to have a great senior campaign for Duke.
Jalen Stinson, a native of Opelika, Alabama, outside of Auburn, kind of down in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, that Opelika exit has a great Chick-fil-A on it, man.
Yeah.
I've stopped there before.
Yes, absolutely. Tiger Town.
That's right.
His brother is a defensive back for Ole Miss, so a really athletic family there for Jalen Stinson. And I do agree he's set to be one of the top defensive playmakers for the Blue Devils. Last up today, Josh.
All right, here's your little bit of a wild card. I mean, so let me just do honorable mention here for a second. If any, parents or friends are listening, this could very easily be Terry Moore. This could very easily be Ryan Smith. It could very easily be VJ Anthony, who by the way, Coach Diaz said is like a freak this offseason in the weight room. They can't get him out of the weight room. So I could go a lot of different directions here. Where I'm going is a transfer in the linebacker room, and that is Alex Howard. Alex Howard was at Youngstown State, and his story was he actually transferred to a coach that we won't talk about there in College Station. He went to Texas A&M for spring ball, and I honestly don't know, so I can't tell you why he left there, but whatever reason, he did not stay after spring ball. He re-entered the portal, landed at Duke. I think he was in the portal for just a couple of days. I think he knew where he wanted to go, and so Alex Howard shows up in Durham, and here's what I think I've picked up on a couple practices I've been to, and just understanding the dynamic there. I believe Alex Howard was brought in to play. I don't believe Alex Howard was brought in to provide depth. I believe he was brought in to play. Now, I understand that we have Trey Freeman at that linebacker spot. I understand we have Nick Morris Jr. at that linebacker spot. Nick Morris Jr. played a ton of snaps last season. I don't think that's going to change. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I believe there could be a little bit of a 4-3 vibe to this defense at times, which would include maybe a safety coming and playing in that linebacker role, or a linebacker being a little bit of a hybrid there. It doesn't really matter. But I think Alex Howard is going to be a very important player for Duke. In his seasons at Youngstown State, he wound up with, I believe it was close to 70 tackles on the season, and that was, obviously that's admirable. I don't even know what style of defense they played there at Youngstown State. I have no clue, but I believe he's going to come in. He's built very, very strong. Obviously, he was built enough for, Texas A&M to bring him in at the linebacker position. And so I look for Alex Howard to kind of be the unsung guy, maybe to be that guy coming in from the transfer portal who's going to make the biggest impact on the defensive side of the football.
Love it. I love it. That's a player that we'll get to learn a little bit more about throughout the course of the season. Anytime you got the new players joining the team, it takes a little while to get acclimated. But we know one thing, Josh, you start making plays, fans of any team, but Duke in particular, are definitely going to be jumping on board with you. And good on you to kind of throw out those honorable mentions for names that might not have been mentioned today, but you're like, hey, let me make sure I cover some of the bases. But I think that kind of circles back to what we discussed at the very top, that, injuries are a factor, and then maybe it is just playing time. You play well enough, then all of a sudden we've got guys that become sort of those top playmakers for Duke going into the season, as here we sit 15 days away from the first game.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of depth, you got these guys that were freshmen last year, Samaj Turner and Terry Simmons, and on the line there. I mean, who knows? Kendi Charles transferred in from Liberty, a highly touted 4-star transfer. I mean, there's no telling, right? We have no idea what this is going to look like in week 5 or 6. And so you're right, depth is very important. But I'll stand by these 5 guys. I think these 5 guys have the best chance of being impact playmakers on the defensive side of the football for sure.
Those 5 guys, one more time, rattle them off for us, Josh.
Oh, man, here we go. All right, we got Trey Freeman. We got Chandler Rivers. We got Wes Williams. We got Jalen Stinson. We have Alex Howard. Those are my 5.
And to kind of bring this all full circle, we've been talking recently a lot. We talked a little bit about it yesterday with Connor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated on the podcast. So many people getting more ready for the football season this year, because over the last few weeks, you've been able to play college football 25 on the gaming system. And so of those top playmakers that Josh Cox just rattled off, only 2 lined up with the top defensive player ratings for Duke football going into the season. Trey Freeman, this has been discussed across many different message boards out there, was only a 74. He is not one of the top 5 defensive players for Duke going into the season. Those top 5, if we went off the video game player ratings, Chandler Rivers, Jalen Stinson, Nick Morris Jr., Joshua Pickett, and then the transfer you just mentioned there at the very end, Kenley Charles, coming in as well. But those would be the top 5 if we just went off the player ratings that were out
now,
there.
Now, look, I'm a huge fan of Nick Morris Jr. I mentioned him already, and I love me some Josh Pickett. Like, Josh Pickett's a great, great dude. But, I mean, I'll stand by.
You got to have Trey Freeman up
my
there, man.
People. I'll stand by my 5.
And Wes Williams was just off the list. He would have been 6th if we were.
They were laughing. A couple of the O linemen were laughing that Justin Pickett was not the highest rated offensive lineman on the team, and it's just like, are you sure about that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know he gets injured, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I mean, when that dude is not injured, he is like Andre the Giant out there moving people around. Like, I mean, you can't. He's immovable. Like, so yeah, it's pretty funny.
Next week we'll circle back and we will we'll talk a little bit about those offensive playmakers. Maybe we'll be able to surprise Josh once again with where the top 5 offensive players look like in that regard. But man, it's always great seeing you, and so appreciative of the time as always. Promote your work one more time, Josh.
Yeah, for sure. You see if you're watching on YouTube, you see it there at Duke FB Talk. My personal is at Joshua Cox, and so do all things Duke athletics. But obviously, this time of year, it is Duke football season, ready to ramp up. If you haven't got your season tickets yet, get them. We'll be tailgating. We'll be hanging out in Section 17, the new Section 17, which is a little bit smaller than it used to be. We got to walk down some stairs, but come and see us. Come hang out with us. Come sit with us. Wallace Wade, man, the most fun you'll have with 5 or 6 of your best friends. So
we love it.
Come do it.
We love it. Josh, thanks for the time. We'll do this again soon, okay?
Have a great day, JJ. We'll see you, man.
All right, that's Josh Cox joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, and that's going to do it for our show here today. Really great stuff. Be sure to check out the Section 17 podcast. Also, subscribe to our podcast here within Locked On Blue Devils. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and thanks so much for your support. Follow us on X at @LO_Blue Devils. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.